Michael, did you want to take over and tell us a little bit about B Corp and B Local?
Absolutely, sure. So yeah, explaining what B Corps are is something that all of us who are in the sort of sustainable business world probably have to do more often than we expect. So there's shorter and longer versions of that story. I think the simplest and shortest one is, I'm sure we've all seen at some point this logo on the back of something you might find at Whole Foods. It's on a lot of direct consumer product labels, but the world of B Corp is much broader and larger than that. Started in the mid 2000s by a few gentlemen in the Philadelphia area, actually, but that was sort of happenstance and a bit in the water in our region, that there's a lot of leaning towards ways to do things in a sustainable and better methodology. But the partners that started a sportswear brand called And One kind of lost their business in a hostile takeover, and they had been using a lot of practices that a lot of us in B Corp land know about, where you're trying to compensate people properly, take care of our not just our bottom line, but also what we call the triple bottom line. So it's people, planet, and profit. And people would include our coworkers, but also like our local communities and people that we impact. And it's the environment, I think, is a pretty obvious part of what we can also look at. Like, how can we be thinking about our supply chains in a way that's more sustainable and going to be less extractive and less damaging, so that when we're creating whatever service or product that we're creating, we're also not creating new and intractable problems. And so these guys from this business who were trying to put those practices into their very successful clothing company, when they lost that, they really were looking for what was next for them. They had done rather well, but they wanted to figure out ways that they could have new businesses or influence other businesses to use practices that could be more sustainable. And they did a lot of research and talked to a lot of interesting people all over the place. Everyone from local Philadelphian Judy Wicks, who founded a place called the White Dog Cafe, all the way to the guys from Ben and Jerry's, who created obviously a huge company that was eventually taken over. I believe it's now a subsidiary of Unilever, which is an interesting multinational that has actually acquired a lot of B Corps and kept them B Corps. But what they started to discover was that you can talk about wanting to be helpful to people, planet, and still find a way to do well while making a profit. But proving that you're really doing that is much more difficult. And they came up with something called the B Impact Assessment. And this assessment is really deep, and it takes a long time to do. I did my company recently recertified, and we tracked it. Myself and another employee together spent 8 hours apiece, so 16 hours just going through our recertification. And then you have to take a lot of documentation and prove the things that you're saying, but it looks at how your governance is structured. It looks at the ratio between your highest paid, executives and your lowest paid employees. So what's the ratio between someone who's cleaning the building to someone who's sitting in a C-suite? It looks at what you're actually creating. You cannot certify if you're an oil company. There are certain industries that are not allowed to become certified B Corps. So, it's everything from what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and then assessing all of that and giving you a score. And there's a possible score of 200 on this assessment. You can't get 200. It's not possible. I think there's actually some things that if you're doing one thing right over here, you probably can't do another thing right over in another section. It's very challenging, but it's also a great opportunity to look at places where you could be improving all the time. So the minimum score to be certified is 80. Very proud to say that on our recent recertification, we made it to 98. I'd never broken 92 before, and I've been a B Corp since 2012. But it's really rigorous. So when you see that circle B, it's not just something that we're paying for. It's something that we're paying for in time and in investment and in caring and in thought and in putting real energy into trying to have businesses that can be a force for good. So that's the definition of what a B Corp is. B Local, which as Fani mentioned, I'm involved with. Just became the chairperson of the Philadelphia B Local, and there's B Locals around the country and I think around the world at this point. I think there's over 2,500 certified B Corps in the U.S., and I want to say it's 6,000 globally. So Be Local Philly is just about 70 or 80 companies in the region who are all certified, and that's a way for us to interact and think about, if we want to be a force for good, it's one thing to be a force within your company, but how can we lock hands with other people in our region and try to drive change and positive impact together? And so that is my explanation of what it means to be a certified B Corp and to be involved in a local.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, that was really interesting. I actually didn't realize there were entire industries that couldn't be part of it. So that's very good to know. So we're going to jump right into our panel questions. So the way that this is going to be set up is, if you've come to all the other Salzberg Center events, maybe it might be kind of similar with the other virtual panels. So we'll start with our panel questions, and then we'll do some breakout rooms. So first, I have questions for everybody, and then I'm going to jump into questions for each person. So unfortunately, Kimberly, who is from Grant Boulevard, wasn't able to be with us today. She's sick, but hopefully we'll have her back. So if you wanted to hear from her today, sadly, she's not here, but we'll make sure that we get her back because she's really cool, and I want you guys to get a chance to meet her. We're going to start with the first question for everybody, which is really just to introduce yourself and talk about how you got here. So you can take this also as an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about the company you work for, if I didn't cover it with my very short explanation. And also just talking about how you learned of and entered your current career field, and whether you always knew that this is where you would end up. When you were an undergrad, like our students here, could you see into the future and kind of see yourself where you are now, or did you think you'd be doing something totally different? So as far as order, why don't we do Robert, then Matt, then Sean, and then Michael. We'll give you a little break.
All right, thank you. My name is Robert Cheatham. I am the founder and CEO of Azavia. However, I am no longer that. I am actually the new Chief Strategy Officer for Element 84. Azavia merged with Element 84 a couple of weeks ago. And in terms of how I first learned about, well, let me just briefly introduce Element 84. It looks a lot like Azavia. If you were familiar with Azavia, which is a local software engineering company based here in Philadelphia that specialized in geospatial data. Element 84 was founded in Virginia, also about 50 people, and many of which live in Philadelphia, and also specializes in geospatial data with a particular emphasis on satellite imagery and Earth observation imagery. How did I learn of, or how did I get into my current field? It's pretty roundabout, and I had no idea I would end up where I am when I was in undergraduate school. I have long had an interest in ecology, ecosystems, and computing, but didn't really ever bring those two thoughts together. I wandered through undergraduate school collecting lots of different classes, but not really getting to a major. And I kind of backed into the one that I qualified for, which was in Japanese language and literature. Studied a lot of other stuff though, history, political science, science, math, accounting, all sorts of things. I then lived overseas in Japan and worked in local government in a town in Japan as a sounds more important than it was, a coordinator for international relations. Very interesting work and a wonderful first job out of school. Exposed me to local government work and also exposed me to a lot of opportunities to learn about land and how land was managed in Japan. Came back to the US and studied landscape architecture. So I moved to Philadelphia from Japan, studied landscape architecture and regional planning. Decided partway through school I didn't want to be a landscape architect. Finished my degree, took my first job as a GIS analyst, starting a crime mapping and analysis unit for the Philadelphia Police Department. Did that for a couple of years. While I was there, taught myself how to write software, and then went from there to a software development job with the city of Philadelphia, and then founded Azavia, which was just me working out of my apartment, and gradually grew as a bootstrap company to about 50 people. And then, which takes me to a few weeks ago when we merged with another company to form a company about 100 people. We do work nationally, internationally, all related to applying software and geospatial technology for good.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. And sorry for mispronouncing Azavia. Go for
You're
it.
not alone.
Danny, am I waiting for an introduction or should I just go?
Oh, no, you can go for it.
Oh.
Sorry.
Hi, my name is Matt. I'm the principal of More Wealth Management here in Philadelphia. No, I definitely did not think that I was going to wind up in this career. I thought I was going to be an astronaut or a professional baseball player, but neither of them really worked out. But I had when I graduated from Brandeis University in Boston with, I majored in American Studies with a minor in economics. I was always really good with numbers, and I kind of just found finance and investments neat. And so I took a gap year, and then I thought maybe I would do this and kind of see if I enjoyed it, which I very much did. I was very good at it. So just with my education and my mathematical nerditude, I kind of gravitated towards this type of industry. Very early in my career, I had an opportunity where I was sort of pulled up the corporate ladder instead of having to climb it all by myself. And I wound up being in a junior executive role at an unusually young age. And one of the neat things about that experience is that I was exposed to some pretty disgusting, Wall Street realities before I had enough experience in the industry to sort of become used to that. And so I think that I found myself maybe a little bit more nauseous during the day than a lot of the other people that were sitting in chairs around me. And it basically upset me so much to realize in the real world that our entire capitalist society was driven by an industry that is primarily corrupt. And so I went from company to company until I realized that I just had to leave the big bank industry altogether if I wanted to pursue the type of career that I wanted to pursue, which resulted in the genesis of More Wealth Management, a small family-owned firm. I was lucky enough to attract and hire some really, really great people, and that empowered us to be able to not just manage personal finances the way we think is appropriate, but also to try to advocate for more honest finance and for investment practices and practices among family finances that had a greater level of attention to community, to environment, to culture, and to ethics. And so kind of dug math, wound up in the investment world, was pretty disgusted by it at an early age, and that's really what drew me to doing something different. And here we are. Now I'm a B corporation for a few years, and I hold that badge of honor because although the Wall Street industry is horribly corrupt, there is a need for people that are open, honest, transparent, and that do advocate for the environment, because we need personal finance. The modern society can't exist without it, but it's broken and it needs fixing. And I'm hoping that in time we can overpopulate the industry with people like me so that maybe in due time we can make a change.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so excited to hear you talk more about that. And I wrote down the word nerditude, and I'm going to be saving that. It's very good. All right, Sean.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm Shawnee, use your pronouns. I'm a sustainability consultant at Revision. We have an architecture studio alongside a sustainability studio, so I'm not the only person with sustainability consultant in my title, would you believe? And we do a lot of stuff over in the sustainability consulting studio. Mostly we do like LEED certifications, if folks are familiar with like LEED buildings. We also do Living Building Challenge consulting. So Living Building Challenge is like a kind of much more rigorous, like sustainability that has kind of social aspects to it as well. But also for buildings, and then kind of a range of other sustainable building consulting type things. I'm the sole person in our studio that does B Corp consulting, as well as a thing called Just. And Just is run by the same organization that runs Living Building Challenge, called International Living Futures Institute. And Just is a kind of smaller scope, more transparency label, but similar to B Corp in that you do have to provide, documentation of your internal practices and metrics and stuff like that. How did I kind of get here? And was this, what I thought I'd be doing as an undergraduate? It was actually almost exactly what I hoped I'd be doing as an undergraduate, except at the time I didn't think it was possible, because I was not pursuing an architecture degree. And I was not pursuing an architecture degree because I was told that I was bad at math all through middle school and high school. Got to college, ended up getting a degree in environmental studies and economics, because I was told I was a big picture thinker, right? And then I think somewhere in there realized that I actually really did like math, but felt like I was kind of I had fallen off the track to like go back to green building, and what I kind of was hoping to do when I had gone into my undergraduate degree. And so I just Googled sustainability Philadelphia over and over again my senior year of college, and ultimately found a company called Inspire, worked there in customer service, and then worked in HR, then went to graduate school for sustainable design. Having basically I think the background that I sold to get into that program was that I partially liaised with our facilities manager for part of my time at Inspire. And then I kind of backed into learning about buildings and kind of getting in the world of buildings and architecture without actually having to become an architect, which has been a kind of accidental and fabulous decision. And so, yeah, ultimately got to the place I never thought I could get to, this route. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. That is really inspiring. And as someone who is also always told they were bad at math, I think it's really important for undergrads and really everyone to remember that you can always like become good at math later. It's not a death sentence. So thank you. All right, awesome. And Michael, why don't you finish us off with this first one?
Yeah, I will say that math recovery is possible. When one gets excited. Difficult, but possible. I'm kind of doing absolutely what I wanted to do and what I never expected to do, and I'm also doing it completely different than I ever thought I'd be doing it. So all of the above, because yeah, I did fall in love with films and filmmaking in high school, actually. I went to film school, originally from the Chicago area, and there's a huge commercial and production industry there. I ended up working in TV commercials while I was still in college. Actually dropped out for a while because I was working so much and learning so much on sets. And that was a lot of fun, working on TV shows and occasionally a little bit on movies. Moved to Philadelphia, decided to finish up my degree at Temple, and ended up being asked by the chair of the department. A Temple alumni had called in asking for a student to help their company. They were an international company. They wanted someone to basically go around the world filming, and they were like, well, there's no student who can go and do that. So I was given that opportunity and ended up doing this crazy job where I traveled to 5 continents in 28 days. I'd never left the country before that. And it was working for an automotive supplier, and the travel was great and the filming was great, and the rest of the experience was horrifying. And the next thing that happened was a friend of mine from restaurants I'd worked at while I was in school got a job at a nonprofit where they were celebrating 125 years of an organization called English Foundation, where they help people with quadriplegia. And I did some filming for them. And it was like this 180-degree experience where I didn't go anywhere, but the project was so rewarding. So this light bulb went off of like, oh, I could use my communication skills like for good. And I kind of just realized that working with nonprofits in particular, like even on a bad day, you know, even if things were difficult, I was still like kind of serving a greater good. And so I entirely accidentally ended up starting my production company between those couple of jobs and started focusing on the nonprofit sector. And I didn't realize that I'd started a triple bottom line business until years later when I found the Sustainable Business Network and then eventually found B Corp. And it turned out there was a language for what I was trying to do or what I thought I was pulling off, you know, already. I didn't think I was some innovator, but it was just nice to find a tribe. And that's one of the things that's nice about being in a B Corp or being involved with B Locals. That there's a whole tribe of people trying to, you know, do well, do good. So yeah, so now I have employees and a team and a company and all kinds of responsibilities. I don't know that I ever would have sought out on my own intentionally. You know, I didn't apply for a job. I just kind of built one. And I've had my company for over 20 years and there's 10 of us and it's pretty crazy, but that's kind of how it happened. So yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to do, except I'm not not in the movie business. But I'm still making moving pictures. So yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. This is great. There's so many different paths, all kind of meandering in their own ways. Awesome. I love it. Okay, so I think we're kind of, a big goal of this panel is to sort of demystify the B Corp world, but also just the world of what it looks like to have any job. And I think what happens a lot for undergraduates, and I know it happened to me, was you have this idea of what you want to do, but you have no idea what it actually feels and looks like to do it. So the next question is kind of addressing that. I would love if you could just talk a little bit about a day in your life doing what you do. And maybe it's different every day. You could talk about that. But just kind of what it's like to have your job, how you would describe it. And we can do the same order that we just did. So Robert, Matt, Sean, and then Michael. So Robert, go for it.
Thank you. I will say that I am new to my job as Chief Strategy Officer, and I feel newly incompetent in a way that I have not felt in 20 some years. The thing about being an entrepreneur and starting your own company and then growing it gradually is you learn everything incrementally, and that's it means that you know a whole lot of stuff at the end of 20 years. And then when you take a new job, you know nothing. And in fact, everything you know may actually prevent you from being effective. I would say my job has changed a lot over that period of time. I really did start out as a software developer, one person just working out of my apartment, and spent most of my time writing software and working with data. That has gradually evolved to the point where I am a horrible software developer and you would not want to trust me with your software. And I spend much more of my time managing an organization. Prior to my new job, I probably spent about a quarter of my time on administrative tasks. So everything from accounting to legal contracts and so on. About a quarter of my time on business development. And by that, I mean writing proposals, developing budgets, reviewing other people's proposals, meeting new people, talking to them about how we could try to solve their problems. About a quarter of my time on what we call people operations. So that's everything from HR to benefits, payroll, managing people, performance reviews, all the stuff that goes along with that. And with the remaining time, probably about 10 to 15% on executive planning and strategy. You think that an executive is spending all their time on executiving. It's not true. Like you eke out the strategy and executive planning stuff in the interstices. And then I've conventionally tried to allocate at least 10% of my time to just learning new things. And that includes reading, writing. I write blogs I wrote blogs for Azavia, going to conferences, listening to what other people have to say, watching, participating in workshops, things like that. And Azavia as an organization put a real premium on trying to get everyone to allocate 10% of their time on learning new things, sharpening the saw, trying to make sure that we are prepared for the next thing coming along. And in the technology world, I feel like that's particularly important. Yeah, I'll stop there. Like I don't, like I said, I don't really know what my new job is. I don't have a job description. Chief Strategy Officer sounds kind of cool, but I have no idea what it means yet. I did spend all of today strategizing with the CEO, and that was fun.
Awesome. That's great. I love the idea of really blocking out 10% of your time to learn new things. That's really smart, especially when you're really used to doing the same thing. It can get lost. Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Matt, you are next. A day in your life.
So a day in my life. Probably easier just to kind of talk about like from a segment standpoint, like what we spend our time on, because the days don't necessarily, for me at least, always follow the same schedule with appointments and client availability. But generally speaking, first part of my day is traditionally just making sure that I'm aware of what's going on in the world, because when you're dealing with investments, if a pin drops across the planet, it seems to affect us locally. And then during our staff meeting, we normally just whine about how broken the world is and how everybody's trying to steal from each other in Wall Street. And then we'll strategize for the day and what kind of tasks need to get done and who we need to take care of and how. And that's pretty much just the preparation part of my day. And then generally speaking, I spend about, let's say, a third of my time assisting people with personal financial planning. The questions that range anywhere from, saving for retirement to planning, education expenses for children or grandchildren, healthcare issues, growing older related financial issues, starting families, changing jobs. I mean, pretty much any type of life event that's worthy of telling your mom about is something that we will be discussing with clients from a planning standpoint. Generally speaking, we do service the mass affluent and the high net worth, but I probably spend, whether it's related to the office directly or things that I'm involved in outside the office, probably about 10% of my time is legitimate pro bono, low income financial planning. That's not where most of our charity is, but I do try to make time for that. Before I was an executive, when I was working for a larger company, a little bit more time for that. But in any case, so about a third of our time is spent, helping people with personal finance. Another third of our time is dedicated to investment management. I mean, at the end of the day, we are an investment firm. And so 50% of our responsibility is to make sure that people are saving properly, investing wisely, making sure that people don't absorb too much risk than they are able to absorb, which tends to be a real problem in the American investment world. And then we spend another third of our time on project related things. I guess that's it. But I would say this, I'm sure that most of us that are on this call have seen movies like Wall Street or Wolf of Wall Street, or movies. It's nothing like any of those movies. It's really, I think people have this sensationalized idea that people that are working in the investment world, it's kind of like buy, sell, the world's coming apart, we're going to make lots of money over here. It's nothing like that. I mean, I may as well just work in a cubicle. But nonetheless, the decisions that we're making, we like to think that they are benefiting not just our clients, but the impacting society in general, because the type of wealth that we work with, the more money we make people, the more money that's going to charity. Because generally speaking, most of our clients are giving something that's loosely related to a percentage of their income. We have had clients call us and say, we made a lot of money last year, we need to up our charitable giving. So I do enjoy what I do from a mathematical standpoint and a planning standpoint. I like to help people, but there is this silver lining to everything that we do, because anytime we're helping with finance, at the end of the day, more money is going back into the community. And we're reminded of that literally every single day. There's not one day that passes where I'm not talking about charity with somebody, some client. So I don't know if that's a good description of like my daily life from like 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., but prepping time, planning time, investment time, and community time. That tends to make up the majority of my work.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great description. I like how everyone's kind of thinking in percentages. It's very useful. Cool. Thank you. Sean, your turn. A day in your life as a sustainability consultant.
I want to add something to my last answer. It was the one thing that I wrote down that I forgot to say, and I think perhaps it would be helpful to this room, so I wanted to say it, which is something I spent a lot of time doing in my first like year or so out of college, was just going to events. Like any sustainability event in Philly, I probably attended like 90% of them in the latter half of 2017 and most of 2018. And I still have relationships from those, like that kind of year and a half of going to a ton of events. I got connected to my graduate program through a panel that I attended. I've gotten like there's tons of people, I've gotten other people jobs through those connections. And so just huge recommendation to the students in this room to just whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever field you're trying to get into, just go to events that are related to it, even if they're kind of distantly related. You never know who's going to be there, and you never know what kind of relationships you're going to forge. So just wanted to make sure I got that across. In terms of a day in the life as the sole person who has not ever started a business on this panel and has no interest or intention to, the day in my life is, in my work life, is pretty like, depends on what kind of work we have kind of coming into revision, right? So a lot of it's lead stuff. So I'm either looking at, site plans or floor plans. Sometimes I'll like switch gears to, our B Corp and Just Work, which is kind of a very different type of work. It's not quite as like spatial, or like, it's not as I'm not kind of looking at something, visual. I'm thinking more about like, okay, how do I want to, ask this business about their, about like some changes they could make in their like internal operations, or a policy that, could they ratchet up their, PTO that they offer a little bit? I'm kind of thinking through how to like propose goals and changes to folks, and how to like ask for the right documentation. The documentation thing is really big in both lead and in B Corp and Just, because so much is just making sure that you have like the right document that says the right thing and it has the right, date on it, and you've kind of called out the pieces that are exactly what it is that you need. So I look at a lot of documents. I have to stay really organized. That's, I think, another really big tip I have for current college students, is to develop how it is that you work best and how it is that you stay organized. That's like, for me, that's a make or break. I left college pretty disorganized, and really struggled the first couple of years to develop a system. And now, not to kind of like toot my own horn, but now that one of the biggest kind of pieces of feedback I hear from folks at Revision is I make them more organized. And that's not a thing that ever came naturally to me. That was a thing that I had to learn. So I think, especially if you're interested in any kind of like certification work, whether it's lead, whether it's B Corp, whether it's just LBC, like there's so many different kinds of certifications out there, and even like ESG certifications. So much of that is managing like hundreds of documents and like making sure, do we have are we telling the right story with the materials that we have? Are we checking all the boxes? What changes could we make to like get to help, this project or this business get 10 more points or 5 more points or whatever it is that they need. And so much of that is just like being on top of it and like knowing what you have, what you need, and what's still outstanding. So that's just like being organized. It's like project managey stuff that can feel kind of boring, but is really important. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. That's really great advice. I think organization can save you a lot of time and effort. Cool. Thank you. And Michael, you can close us out for this one.
Boy, I'll do my best. There's really not 2 days that look alike. I will say that what Sean was talking about with figuring out ways to be organized, I think part of how I ended up with this accidental entrepreneurship is a good case of ADHD, and my whole life is coping mechanisms about managing like that. Like being an entrepreneur is perfect for me because one minute I'm meeting with a new client and talking about a type of nonprofit I've never worked with. It could be learning something new about, talking with someone from ACLU, and the next meeting could be with someone from a domestic violence organization. And so that's perfect for that. But if I don't have ways to like really buckle down and figure out how I'm going to manage the 200 things that I have to juggle running a small business, it gets pretty scary pretty fast. So yeah, those habits are invaluable. And everyone that I work with, the people that are able to keep themselves focused and keep prioritizing, those are the people that are just tremendous colleagues, and they just make your life better. So yeah, boring stuff, but it's a lifetime of struggle to do it. But yeah, I mean, there is no typical day for me in terms of my small business, because today I'm in Baltimore with a family where there's, so, you know, I'm interviewing a 98-year-old woman and a 65-year-old woman who's dying of brain cancer. Like, that's today. I'll be driving, you know, now I'm in this call, and then I'll be driving home, and tomorrow I'll be working on stuff for Habitat for Humanity. And I'm also going to be catching up on 2 days of emails that are everything from helping my employees drive projects that they're doing to making sure that bills are getting paid or the taxes are getting filed. Like, it's a lot. And I love it. And except for the parts that I don't love, but I have not heard of anyone with a job where they love every single part. And, but the variety with running, at least the business that I have, is incredible and keeps me engaged. And yeah, I will say, as an entrepreneur, I get to build a place where I want to work, and I get to attract and work with people that I would love to have as colleagues. And it makes for an awesome thing. I think that is something that might be slightly symptomatic of B Corps, is that, again, back to that thing about a tribe, it's not just a job. It's like a job where hopefully everyone is sharing some kind of an ethos to make some kind of a improvement in the world around us. And it may not be through the type of work you would expect. Not everyone is doing sustainability like Sean. Like, sometimes it's stuff you don't expect, like financial planning or GIS, right? But I mean, these guys are all finding ways to change the world, and you end up attracting other people with that similar ethos within that sphere. So it's a good way to enjoy the day.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. I think it's great to hear this from all of you. I think it's so important to consider if you're the kind of person that would rather have a ton of variety and no day is the same, or if you kind of need more consistency. So it sounds like we have kind of a range in this group, which is pretty cool. So we're going to jump into questions that I wrote for each of you. So Sean is going to be first, and Sean, you might have answered some of this in your first response. So we can kind of approach this however you want, but today's actually my first day meeting Sean. So it's really great to meet Sean. And when I was reading about kind of your background, I saw that you've only ever worked for B Corps, which I think is pretty remarkable, because it's not necessarily like the easiest thing to break into. They can often be very competitive. So I have kind of a two-part question for you. So first, you said a little bit about how you entered this field. I'm wondering about your desire to keep working for B Corps in particular. And then I'm also curious about your choice to go to grad school, and hoping you could talk a little bit more about that. That might be something that some of our students are considering doing. So I'm curious about what made you decide to go for it, what made you decide to choose the program that you chose, and how to kind of make those decisions when the time comes.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of only working for B Corps, that was kind of by accident. And this is the only company that I worked for full time, to be totally fair. And I'm only 27. I've only worked full time for 2 companies. So I don't know how. Hopefully for a long time I'd stay with Revision and can say this for forever. But the company that I worked for my first couple of years out of college, Inspire, they became a B Corp right after I started. So I didn't know that it was in process, but it just kind of so happened. And then I just kind of kept being annoying to the people that it seemed like were in charge of our B Corp stuff and in charge of impact. And then I kind of annoyed myself into moving to our other headquarters in Los Angeles. So I was out there for about 1.5 years. And then I really needed to come home because Philly's the greatest city in the world. And so I thought back to a panel that I had attended maybe like fall 2017, where there was a guy speaking who was from Jefferson Sustainable Design Program. And he said something along the lines of like, this program used to be only for architects, but now we open it up to anyone because climate change is too urgent to not give everyone this kind of education. That person's Rob Fleming. I think some may have met him before, but he was the founder of he's not there he's not at Jefferson anymore, but he was the founder of the Sustainable Design Program. And that kind of sentence like rung in my head and stayed with me so long that when it was time to come home and leave Inspire, I applied for that program thinking like, I want a skill set that's like quite different from the skill set that I've developed over the last few years. I had actually, I was in customer service for 2 years, kind of always doing impact stuff on the side, always like helping out with our B Corp stuff on the side, ultimately led our first recertification. And I had moved out to LA to kind of do like an HR culture type role. And the kind of skill set that I developed there was very like kind of broad project management, kind of like office management, vendors, people, stuff like that. And so I really wanted like a totally new skill set to kind of complement what I had already been developing. And I also thought that it was very cool how that's the perspective of climate change is too urgent of a problem to not like let everyone into this program. I thought that was such a rare and important perspective. And so I didn't apply to any other grad school. It was Jefferson or bust for me. And yeah, it was an incredible experience. It was very like loose and self-driven in like ways that felt like it was kind of exactly what I needed at the time. I started in fall 2020, so it was kind of throughout the thick of the pandemic. And then got to like probably do one of the coolest things I'll ever get to do that has changed me so much, which was to write a thesis on like housing and like kind of the interactions of housing and climate change in Philly. And yeah, the way to kind of bring it all home to how I kind of use that in my day-to-day. Well, first of all, I found revision through that program, through the Sustainable Design Program, got connected because they kind of oddly needed someone with a little bit of HR experience to help out on like some part-time stuff. And then I kind of backed my way into a full-time sustainability consulting position there after I graduated. But the Sustainable Design Program teaches to lead, basically. So a lot of those specific skills kind of like transferred right over. A lot of the specific like ways of thinking about things transferred right over, kind of the philosophy of lead, and LBC as well. So yeah, kind of some highly specific stuff in there, but hopefully some things that are helpful to folks as well.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I really like what you said about grad school, looking at grad school as a way to gain skills that you didn't gain through work, I think is a really good way to think about it. Thank you, Sean. So up next we have Robert. So Robert founded Azavia, but now you're at Element 84. And so I was curious because Element 84 is actually not a B Corp, but it shares a lot of the values that make B Corps unique. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about what students can look for if they're looking to work at a values-driven company besides the B Corp certification. How do they know that a company is kind of doing what it says it does, or shares the values that are important to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the first thing that you would probably want to ask yourself if you're looking for work is, what are your values? What do you care about? What are the things you want out of work? People want different things from work. Sometimes it's just a paycheck. Sometimes it's a sense of purpose. Sometimes it's skills development. Sometimes it's all of those things. But think hard about, like, what do you want to get out of this? I would not limit your search for that kind of meaningful work to B corporations. B corporation bar is pretty high and keeps changing over time. But there are lots of ways to pursue purposeful, meaningful work. And if you expand your scope to consider places like nonprofit organizations, government service. I got my start in government service for the most part. Universities, academic research, creating new knowledge. There's just a lot of different ways to approach this. In addition to B Corps, I was part of another group of organizations called the Tugboat Institute. There are other similar organizations like Small Giants. Each of them are networks of companies that are purpose-driven. Tugboat has what they call the 7 Ps that are qualifications for joining their group. And one of those 7 Ps is purpose, companies that have a stated mission or purpose. The second is that they're privately held, meaning they're not publicly traded and are not owned by outside investors that aren't working in the organization. That's important because the priorities of the organization are usually driven by the people who hold the power. And at the end of the day, the owners or shareholders or the board of directors, who may be the same people, hold that power. And if you're subject to the whims of investors, you're a little bit not in control of your own destiny as an organization. And there are other components: profit, people first, pragmatic innovation, and I won't go through all the 7 Ps. But when you're meeting with organizations, I would ask direct questions as part of your interviewing process. When you're interviewing for a job, you're not just trying to convince them to hire you. You're interviewing the organization and the people that you're going to work with. And it's an enormous opportunity to both make a positive impression and learn more about the world and the workplace. Ask not just the executives, but coworkers, what are this organization's values? What is the mission of this organization? And maybe it'll be on their website, maybe it won't be, but tell me more about the purpose. How is that purpose realized in this organization? It's just a mission statement, but it doesn't really guide day-to-day decisions. And people will appreciate being asked about those things. It's a good sign that you're looking for the right things. And if they can't answer them, or they have answers that don't jive with what you're looking for, it's really key information. And finally, I would urge people, I didn't do this, I didn't think about it until later. It's only become important as I've gained more experience. Ask about who the owners or investors of the organization are, and if possible, like, what are their values? Because a place may sound like, and it may truly sincerely want to have a particular kind of mission, but if the owners or the investors of an organization are the ones calling the shots and they have different values, they can change everything. They can change the leadership, they can change the executive team, and they can shift the direction of the company. That doesn't mean investors are bad people or investment-run companies are not the places you want to work for. But there's a characteristic difference between an organization that, let's say, has a bunch of financial services firms or oil companies as the chief investors, and a company that may have a family office or a foundation or a philanthropy as the key investors. And those are things that can help you understand what's the underlying power structure and how does that power affect the values and meaning of the position.
Awesome. That's really great advice. Thank you. I think, it is so important to remember that the interview goes both ways. And I really like the questions that you suggested. All right. Matt, you are next. So one thing that you mentioned when we met is that a lot of people think of the financial sector as being sort of antithetical to the social, environmental, and workplace values that you subscribe to at More Wealth Management. So I'm wondering what values-driven and ethical finance means to you.
Thought long and hard about this. And I think that in my industry, value-driven ethical finance means making decisions on behalf of your clients that your mom would be proud of. I don't think that that is very difficult to do. Apparently, I'm wrong. And I don't think that necessarily it's the finance sector that is antithetical to the social and environmental agenda that we have. I mean, the finance sector is necessary, right? I mean, money puts food on our table. It pays for our children's education. It pays for our necessary health care. I mean, we need money, and in a world that works on money, you need an industry to, be able to distribute that money and to be able to consult people on how to deal with money and money problems. It's not the finance sector from a technical perspective, it's the people that run it. Because in the modern financial sector, it's too easy to steal. We live in a world that's like totally and completely void of accountability. And the worst places of that are politics and finance, flat out. If you were to use the word pollution in the broadest sense, the finance industry has polluted planet Earth more than any other industry ever, including the oil industry. Mind you, that a lot of the profits in the oil industry are actually generated by financial encouragement. But I just want to be clear, it's not like if you go into the financial industry, you're going into just, a bad place. Some people might say, well, the firearms industry is just fundamentally bad and there's not really much you can do about it. I don't think the finance sector is like that, but the finance sector is much more profitable than the firearms sector. And when there's lots and lots of money, there's lots and lots of greed. When there's lots and lots of greed, there's lots and lots of misplaced power. So one might say, why would you even want to be in that industry? Well, I think that because the modern financial industry has become become so antithetical because of what people have done to it, we need not avoid the industry. We need to find great people to be in the industry, because the industry is never going to go away. Whether it's working as it should or whether it's flawed, we still need it. And that's the problem with 2023, is that we almost recognize it's broken, and we live in a society that seems very unwilling to fix it, and yet we still require it, and we're willing to pay for it, even though we all know how broken it is. And I don't want to necessarily sensationalize more wealth management. We're 6 people. We manage about a little bit less than $500 million in liquid assets and maybe about 800 million in total assets. 750. I mean, more wealth management is not going to save the world. But I do think that if we are able to bring good people and we can acquire a louder and louder voice, and there are organizations like B Corp, B Labs, the type of organization that fosters this kind of culture, and we can basically spread the world that there are companies within the finance industry that are not spewing verbal pollution and financial pollution over the rest of the world, I think that slowly but surely maybe we can fix it. I am more proud of the advocacy I have given to other institutions, the advocacy I've given to other people on how to manage money in an ethical way. I'm more proud of that than the profitability of my firm, although maybe that's why we're a B corporation. So yeah, I think this industry is broken, and I think that people not only look at Wall Street as being disgusting, but I think that we're looking at it being disgusting and we're not even doing anything about it. Maybe it's because good people feel defeated. But here's the end game. The end game is that the value of corporations depend on investment. If everybody were to sell Microsoft stock tomorrow, the stock would crash. And Microsoft would have to do something about it. And it doesn't matter whether it's ExxonMobil or Wells Fargo, most of Wall Street's money is in the publicly traded world. And if we can teach people that you can invest responsibly and not sacrifice investment returns, then we can slowly but surely convince people, don't invest your money in those stocks, invest them in this one. And we can see over the last half decade that, believe it or not, companies that do score higher in the social meter have been outperforming their competitors that score lower. And that is starting to be a visible problem for companies that don't advocate for social good. So the long and the short of it is, not only am I aware that my industry is broken, I talk about it all the time, and I do so in a manner where I'm trying to bring people over to my side. I want people to, join the rebel forces, so to speak. And it's important that people begin to know that even though the banking industry is broken, we can do a little bit about that on our own personal level. And then we get into the conversation about spreading the word in small pieces eventually will make a difference. So if anybody would like to know how to invest in a more socially responsible way, by all means, reach out to us. We'll definitely teach you how, because it ain't that hard.
Awesome.
Oh, one more thing. If anybody ever hears that you have to sacrifice your own personal financial interests in order to do good in this world, we have mathematical definitive proof that that is a misleading comment. You can actually invest responsibly and do well in terms of performance. So students, if you are considering the financial industry, don't avoid it. Come join me and make it better.
I really like the way that you think about this topic, Matt. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Michael, so this will be the last question of our panel, and then we'll do breakout rooms. So Michael is going to close us out here for this section. So you might have touched on this a little bit, but I want to hear from you a little bit about entrepreneurship. So you started out in film school, you had no idea how to break into the field. You ended up founding your own company. And so I'm curious about what advice you would give to students who want to carve out a space for themselves in a field that might feel really intimidating right now.
So yeah, there's a couple ways to interpret that question. I'm not sure that entrepreneurship has to be at the core of that in terms of breaking into difficult fields, because I didn't, want it since I was interested in film since high school. All I'd heard about is it's who you know, it's not what you know, and I didn't know anybody. So I was like, how in the world am I going to do this? I just want to point out one thing really quickly to kind of piggyback on almost everything everybody else was saying in this section. I do want to point out when we talk about triple bottom line with people, planet, and profit, that profit is part of that. And I think you can think about your values and where profit falls on that. Is it, is financial success at the top of something that you need in your life and from your work? Like, Robert's saying, some people just want a paycheck. Some people want some other types of rewards. So where does that fall for you? But if you are looking at a business that you're thinking about working for, if they're not profitable, that's not a secure job. And that's something that business has to do. And for us to continue to have our B Corps have a potential to have any ability to be a force for good, we have to create stable jobs that we can sustain. And that's a commitment that we're making to the people that we're hiring or the people that we're working with, is to sustain each other and keep our lives going. So I just want to put that in there, because I think it matters to not forget that it's not only is it okay to make a profit, but if we don't do it, we're not working. So, but yeah, it's breaking in, I think so the film industry is probably similar to a lot of industries that are difficult to break into. I think the stuff that Sean was saying earlier about like going to events is really key, because when you don't know anyone, but you start showing up is how you get to know people. So yes, open events are an amazing place to do that. And I spent a lot of time if I would meet someone, I would basically put on a schedule of how often I would call them to see if there's any chance of getting a gig to work for them on a commercial or a film or something. And it'd start with like calling them every few weeks, and pretty quickly we'd get down to every 6 months. And eventually people forget when they met you. They don't realize that they met you at a panel that they spoke on. Now they're like, oh yeah, how you doing? How was your vacation? I haven't talked to you in 6 months. And it's just part of how networking, building a network is weird. It's something that takes a tremendous amount of time, and things that aren't, networking doesn't always have to be like the verb that you're doing. Sometimes it's just like being nice to your roommates. And if your roommates are also in film school, they might work ahead of you and actually break in before you. And next thing you know, that's like the best person in your network. And someone that is working for you today could be your boss tomorrow in my field. And that happens a lot. So, it's just showing up, going to things, being the person that you want to be. And there's just one other thing that I would say, like sometimes I think place is super important. I know we're in this era now, this post-COVID virtual era where we could live anywhere that we want to live in theory, but there are some industries, like the film business, in theory, you need to choose LA or New York. Maybe you can go to Montreal, Vancouver, Montreal, there's different parts of Canada, but like if you really want to work in television, you should probably move to New York. it's really much easier to be broke and young in New York. When you're young, it's easier to be broke in a city that's difficult to be in once. But like, if you're going to start meeting other people and you know that your industry is focused in an area, if you want to be in, startups and you want to be in, Palo Alto, get out there, because you might as well, you never know who you're going to meet in line at the coffee shop, let alone at the events. And by the way, there's a lot more events around a specific industry when you go to where it's housed. So I think that's one of the things that I talk about to a lot of people that come to me is, the first thing I'm like is, where do you want to be? And they're often, a lot of people are surprised by that question, but you're one long-term relationship away from not really wanting to move. So yeah, might as well be in the place you want to be at when you meet that special person. So, yeah, internships, teachers that having good relationship with teachers, like, yeah, that network of how you're going to get into the impossible field, you just don't know where it's going to come. So just keep showing up. And if you don't tell people where you want to be, if you don't put that energy out, it can't come back to you because no one knows. So that's kind of how and then, yeah, I lucked into this weird little entrepreneurial pocket of happiness, but that was luck. That was showing up too.
Awesome. Thank you. Lots of really good advice in there. Be a nice person is always good advice as far as I'm concerned. And it is good career advice. And I also want to shout out our students who are here. You're doing the thing right now. You're showing up to an event where you get to network, which is pretty cool. So we're actually going to move into that part of this now. So you'll get to be in some smaller groups with some of these folks, with all of these folks. So we're going to break the first round up randomly. In the interest of time, I want to offer the option of you can include question number 9 if you want to talk about that. So that was just giving advice to your college self if you want to. But students also, we can prioritize your questions. So definitely bring any questions you have. And panelists, you can talk about these 2 questions if you would like to do that. So let's go ahead and break into those groups.